The arrow had missed the dog's leg by less than an inch, but the wire snare wrapped around her hind paw had not. Jareth Lowell knelt in the cold creek water, her fingers working carefully to loosen the cruel metal loop that had bitten deep into the border collie's flesh. The dog whimpered softly, brown eyes fixed on her face with a mixture of pain and confusion. Jareth made a low, clicking sound with her tongue, the same noise she used to calm frightened horses and skittish goats in her travels across the borderlands. "Easy now," she murmured, her tusks catching slightly on the common tongue as she spoke. "Almost free." The snare was old, rusted in places, likely set for rabbit or fox by some trapper who had forgotten it seasons ago. Such carelessness made Jareth's jaw tighten. Animals suffered for human negligence more often than malice, though the result was the same either way. She had splints in her pack, carved from willow and wrapped with soft leather strips. The leg was not broken, thank the old gods, but the paw was badly swollen and would need binding. She heard the footsteps before she saw the man, heavy boots on rocky ground, moving fast but not recklessly. Jareth did not look up from her work. The dog's ears perked, and her tail gave a feeble wag despite the pain. "Sable." The voice was rough with disbelief, and something that might have been hope. Jareth finished loosening the snare and gently lifted the dog's paw free, then finally raised her eyes to the man standing at the creek's edge. He was tall for a human, though not unusually so, with broad shoulders and the kind of weathered face that came from years of sun and wind. His hair was dark brown, shot through with premature gray at the temples, and his eyes were the color of winter sky. Those eyes went wide when they took in Jareth's green skin, her pointed ears, the small tusks that curved up from her lower jaw. For a moment neither of them moved. Then the dog whimpered again, and the spell broke. "She is injured," Jareth said, keeping her voice calm and level. "The snare cut deep. I have splints, but she needs rest and clean water for the wound." The man splashed into the creek without hesitation, dropping to his knees beside them. His hands hovered over the dog, clearly wanting to touch but afraid of causing more pain. Jareth could see the tremor in his fingers. "I thought she was dead," he said quietly. "It has been 3 days." "She is strong," Jareth replied. She reached into her pack and pulled out the willow splints and a clay jar of salve. "Hold her steady while I bind the paw." He obeyed without question, his large hands gentle as he cradled Sable's head and murmured soft reassurances. Jareth worked quickly, cleaning the wound with creek water, applying the salve that smelled of comfrey and yarrow, then wrapping the paw with practiced efficiency. The dog bore it well, only whining once when Jareth had to probe the deepest part of the cut to ensure no debris remained. "You are a healer," the man said. It was not a question. "For animals," Jareth confirmed. "I travel between settlements, offering my services where they are needed." "I am Henry Rusher." He paused, seeming to struggle with something, then added, "Thank you for helping her, for not just leaving her." Jareth tied off the binding and sat back on her heels. "I would not leave any creature to suffer in a snare." Henry lifted Sable carefully, cradling her against his chest. The dog licked his chin weakly, and Jareth saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. There was a story here, she thought. A weight of grief in the way he held the animal, as though she were made of spun glass. "Do you have somewhere dry to keep her?" Jareth asked. "The binding must stay clean for at least a week. If infection sets in, she could still lose the paw." "I have a cottage," Henry said, "about 2 miles north near the high pastures." He hesitated, his eyes meeting hers. "Would you come?" "To make sure I do this right. I can pay you. Not much, but I have smoked meat and cheese and a shed where you could sleep if you do not mind the smell of sheep." Jareth studied him carefully. She had learned to read human faces over her years of travel, to distinguish genuine need from the kind of invitation that came with hidden intentions. Henry Rusher looked desperate but not dangerous. His clothes were worn but clean, his hands calloused from honest work. And there was something in his eyes, a raw vulnerability that spoke of recent loss. "I will come," she said, "but only for the dog's sake. Once she is healing well, I will continue my travels." Relief washed over Henry's features so completely that he looked 10 years younger for a moment. "Of course. Yes, thank you." They climbed out of the creek together, water streaming from their boots. Jareth shouldered her pack, a battered leather thing that held all her tools and possessions. Henry carried Sable as though she weighed nothing, despite the fact that the border collie was well-muscled and solid. The walk to the cottage was quiet at first. The land around them was beautiful in the stark way of high country, all rolling hills covered in late autumn grass and scattered groves of birch and oak. Jareth could see the remains of stone walls in places, old boundary markers between pastures. But no sheep grazed the fields, and the emptiness felt wrong somehow. "You said high pastures," Jareth ventured, "but I see no flock." Henry's jaw tightened. "Raiders came 6 weeks ago, killed most of the sheep, scattered the rest. I have been trying to gather the survivors, but without Sable." He trailed off, his arms tightening around the dog. "I am sorry," Jareth said, and meant it. "Not your fault." Henry's voice was rough again. "Just the way of things out here. The borderlands are dangerous." They crested a hill, and Jareth saw the cottage below. It was small but well built, with stone walls and a thatched roof that looked recently repaired. Smoke rose from the chimney, which surprised her. If Henry had been searching for his dog for 3 days, who was tending the fire, as if reading her thoughts, Henry said, "My niece is here. Iris. She is 10 years old. Her parents died last spring, and she came to live with me." There was something flat in the way he said it, as though reciting facts rather than speaking of family. Jareth filed that away, her healer's instinct sensing another wound beneath the surface. The cottage door opened before they reached it, and a small girl with tangled brown hair peered out. Her face was too thin, her dress hanging loose on a frame that should have been rounder at her age, but her eyes lit up when she saw the dog in Henry's arms. "Sable." She started forward, then stopped abruptly when she caught sight of Jareth. "Iris, this is Jareth Lowell," Henry said quickly. "She found Sable and helped her. She is a healer." Iris stared at Jareth with wide eyes. The girl did not scream or run, which was better than some reactions Jareth had received, but the fear was there, barely suppressed. Jareth made herself small, crouching down slightly and keeping her movements slow. "Your uncle is right," she said gently. "I helped Sable, but she still needs care. Would you like to help me make sure she heals properly?" Iris glanced at Henry, who nodded encouragingly. The girl took a tentative step forward. "Will she be all right?" "If we keep the wound clean and let her rest, yes," Jareth replied. "She is a brave dog. She did not even try to bite me when I removed the snare." That earned a small smile from Iris. "Sable does not bite. She is the best dog in the whole world." "I believe you," Jareth said. Henry carried Sable inside, and after a moment's hesitation, Jareth followed. The cottage interior was dim but clean, with a central hearth and simple furniture that looked handmade. A loft ladder led to a sleeping area above, and a door in the back wall presumably open to the shed Henry had mentioned. The fire was burning low, and a pot of something that smelled like thin soup hung over the coals. Henry laid Sable on a pile of blankets near the hearth, arranging them carefully so the dog's injured paw was elevated slightly. Sable's tail thumped weakly against the floor, and Iris immediately knelt beside her, stroking her head with gentle fingers. "She found you," Iris whispered to the dog. "I knew you would come back." Jareth set her pack down and began unpacking the supplies she would need. More salve, clean cloth for changing the bandages, a tincture of willow bark in case the pain became too great. Henry watched her with an intensity that made her aware of every movement. The binding should be changed twice daily, Jareth explained. Morning and evening. I will show you how. Will you stay? The question came from Iris, not Henry. The girl was looking up at Jareth with an expression that was half hope, half fear. To make sure we do it right. Jareth met Henry's eyes over Iris's head. He said nothing, but the plea was written clearly on his face. She thought of the empty pastures, the too thin child, the cottage that felt more like a way station than a home. Something broken here, her instincts whispered. Something that needed mending beyond just a dog's injured paw. I will stay for a week, she heard herself say, to ensure Sable heals cleanly. The relief in the cottage was palpable. Iris's shoulders relaxed, and Henry exhaled slowly, as though he had been holding his breath. Thank you, he said again. The words seemed inadequate, but Jareth could hear the weight of genuine gratitude beneath them. She nodded and turned her attention back to Sable. The dog was resting more comfortably now, her breathing steady. Jareth checked the binding one more time, then sat back. She should eat if she can, Jareth said. Something soft, broth with bread soaked in it if you have bread. I will make some, Iris said, jumping to her feet with the first real animation Jareth had seen from her. The girl scurried to the shelves and began pulling down a loaf and a clay bowl. Henry stood awkwardly, clearly wanting to help but not knowing how. Jareth took pity on him. Show me the shed, she said. I should settle my things. He led her out the back door and across a small yard to a sturdy wooden structure that did indeed smell of sheep, though the scent was old and fading. Inside were empty pens, a few bales of hay, and a corner that looked like it had once been used for lambing. Henry had clearly made an effort to prepare it for a guest. Fresh straw was piled in one of the pens, and a wool blanket lay folded on top. It is not much, Henry said, sounding embarrassed. It is dry and warm, Jareth replied. That is more than I have had in some places. She set her pack down and turned to find Henry still standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading afternoon light. He was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. I meant what I said, he told her. Thank you. Sable is all Iris has left of her old life. Her father gave her that dog as a puppy if Sable had died. He stopped, shaking his head. Jareth felt a pang of sympathy. But she did not die. She will heal. Because of you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Jareth was not ready to examine. She turned away, making a show of arranging her bedroll on the straw. I should check on the binding before dark, she said. The first day is the most critical. Henry took the hint and stepped back. I will get started on evening chores. Call if you need anything. He left, and Jareth allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. The cottage, the man, the child, the injured dog. She had meant to pass through this area quickly, perhaps stop at the next village to trade her services for supplies before moving on. She was not meant to stay in one place, was not meant to become entangled in human lives. But as she walked back to the cottage and found Iris carefully spooning broth into a bowl, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration, Jareth felt something shift in her chest, something that felt dangerously like belonging. Sable ate the broth-soaked bread eagerly, which was a good sign. Jareth stayed close, monitoring the dog's breathing and checking for signs of fever. Iris sat cross-legged on the floor, asking quiet questions about animal healing that Jareth answered as simply as she could. How did you learn to do this? Iris asked. My mother taught me, Jareth said. She was a healer too, for animals and sometimes for people when no one else would help them. Where is she now? She died 5 years ago. The words came easier than they once had. Time had blunted the sharpest edge of grief, leaving only a dull ache. "I am sorry," Iris said softly. Then, after a pause, "My mother died too, and my father. There was a sickness in our village. It took a lot of people." Jareth looked at the girl, seeing the shadows in her young eyes. "That must have been very hard." "Uncle Henry came to get me," Iris continued. "But he did not really want me here. He was sad about Aunt Margaret. She died too, a few years before. He does not talk much now. Not like he used to," my mother said. There was no accusation in Iris's voice, only a kind of resigned sadness that no child should have to carry. Jareth felt anger kindle in her chest, not at Henry exactly, but at the unfairness of it all. A man lost in grief, a child lost in loneliness, living in the same house but not truly together. "Grief is hard," Jareth said carefully. "It makes people close themselves off sometimes. But that does not mean they do not care." "I know," Iris said. "I just wish things were different." The door opened, and Henry came in carrying a pail of water and an armful of firewood. He set both down and glanced at Sable, his expression softening when he saw the empty bowl. "She ate," Iris announced. "Jareth said that is a good sign." "It is," Henry agreed. He looked at Jareth. "Will you join us for supper? It is not fancy, but there is enough." Jareth should have said no. Should have kept the boundaries clear, made it plain that she was here as a healer, nothing more. But Iris was looking at her with such hopeful eyes, and Henry's invitation held none of the wariness she usually encountered from humans. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." The meal was simple, as Henry had warned. Vegetable stew with barley and a few pieces of tough mutton, accompanied by bread that was dense but edible. They ate at a rough-hewn table, Iris chattering about Sable's progress while Henry listened in near silence. Jareth noticed the way he watched his niece, a kind of helpless longing in his eyes, as though he wanted to reach out but had forgotten how. After supper, Jareth changed Sable's binding while Iris held a candle close for light. The wound looked clean, no red streaks or excessive swelling. The dog bore the fresh bandage with good grace, then settled back into her nest of blankets with a sigh. "She will sleep now," Jareth said. "That is what she needs most." "Will you tell me a story?" Iris asked suddenly. She was looking at Jareth with the same hopeful expression from earlier. "Before bed, Uncle Henry used to tell me stories, but he stopped." Henry's face went carefully blank, and Jareth saw the flicker of pain before he could hide it. She wondered what stories he used to tell and what had stolen his voice. "I know a few," Jareth said. "Would you like to hear about the wolf who befriended the moon?" Iris nodded eagerly and climbed the loft ladder to her sleeping nook. Jareth followed more slowly, her head just clearing the upper floor. The loft was small but cozy, with a pallet bed and a few carefully arranged treasures. A wooden horse, a pretty stone, a ribbon that might have been her mother's. Jareth sat on the floor near the ladder and began the story, one her own mother had told her on cold nights. It was a simple tale about a wolf who was lonely and howled to the moon each night, until one night the moon answered back and came down to walk beside him. Iris listened with rapt attention, her eyes growing heavy as the story went on. When Jareth finished, Iris was nearly asleep. "Will you tell me another tomorrow?" she murmured. "If you wish," Jareth said softly. She climbed back down to find Henry banking the fire for the night. He looked up when she reached the bottom of the ladder. "She has not asked for a story in weeks," he said quietly. "I used to tell her one every night, but after the raid, after Sable went missing, I just could not find the words anymore." "Grief does that," Jareth said. "Steals your voice when you need it most." Henry nodded slowly. He looked at Sable, sleeping peacefully by the dying fire. "I was so angry when she did not come back. Angry at the raiders, angry at myself for not protecting her, angry at the world for taking so much. He paused. I think I forgot that Iris was grieving too. It is not too late, Jareth said, to remember. Their eyes met and something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of it. I should let you rest, Henry said. Tomorrow will be a long day. Jareth gathered her pack and headed out to the shed. The night air was cold and sharp, stars scattered across the sky like thrown salt. She bedded down in the straw, wrapped in her cloak, and listened to the wind in the eaves. She had said 1 week. 7 days to heal a dog and then move on, as she always did. But as she closed her eyes, Jareth could not shake the feeling that this place, these people, were going to ask more of her than she had planned to give. The morning came soft and gray, with mist clinging to the hills. Jareth woke to the sound of a rooster crowing somewhere in the distance and the shuffle of hooves in the nearby pasture. She stretched, feeling the pleasant ache of muscles well used, and made her way to the cottage. Henry was already awake, crouched beside Sable and checking her paw with careful fingers. He looked up when Jareth entered, his face showing the kind of exhaustion that came from a sleepless night. I wanted to make sure I was doing it right, he said, gesturing to the binding. But I thought I should wait for you. Jareth knelt beside him and examined the bandage. It was still secure, and when she gently unwrapped it to check the wound, she was pleased to see that the swelling had gone down slightly. The cut was clean, showing no signs of infection. You did well to keep her still, Jareth said. That is half the battle with dogs. They want to run before they are ready. She tried to get up twice in the night, Henry admitted. I had to sleep down here to keep her settled. That explained the exhaustion. Jareth applied fresh salve and rewrapped the paw, then showed Henry the exact technique she used, the tension of the binding, the angle of the splint. Like this, she said, guiding his hands. Firm enough to support, but not so tight that you cut off feeling. Henry's hands were warm beneath hers, calloused and strong but surprisingly gentle. He watched her face as she demonstrated, his attention absolute. When she let go, he practiced the wrapping motion in the air, committing it to memory. I think I have it, he said. Good. Then I will teach Iris as well. She should know in case you are out in the pastures. Iris came down from the loft a few minutes later, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She brightened when she saw Sable awake and alert, tail wagging slowly. Jareth showed the girl how to change the binding, letting her do most of the work under close supervision. Iris's fingers were nimble and careful, and she murmured soothing words to Sable the entire time. You are a natural, Jareth told her, and the girl flushed with pleasure. They ate a simple breakfast of porridge and apples, then Henry excused himself to tend to the few animals he had left. A milk cow, the rooster and his hens, and 2 goats that had survived the raid by sheer luck. Can I help you today? Iris asked Jareth. With healer things, Jareth considered. She had planned to forage for herbs in the nearby woods to replenish her supplies. It would be easier alone, but the hope in Iris's eyes was hard to deny. I am going to gather plants for medicine, Jareth said. If you promise to listen and not wander off, you may come. Iris nodded so vigorously her hair bounced. I promise. They set out an hour later, Jareth carrying her gathering basket and Iris skipping along beside her. The woods were beautiful in the autumn light, all gold and amber and deep green. Jareth showed Iris which plants to look for, how to identify comfrey by its rough leaves and purple flowers, where to find wild garlic growing near the stream. My mother knew some plant lore, Iris said as she carefully dug up a garlic bulb. She made a tea for coughs. But she never taught me much before she got sick. I can teach you, Jareth offered, if you want to learn. Iris looked up at her, dirt on her nose and something like wonder in her eyes. Really? You would do that. Knowledge is meant to be shared, Jareth said. Especially knowledge that heals. They spent the morning foraging, and Jareth found herself enjoying the girls' company. Iris asked good questions, listened carefully, and had a quick mind that grasped concepts easily. She reminded Jareth a little of herself at that age, eager to learn and hungry for a purpose. When they returned to the cottage, arms full of plants and roots, they found Henry trying to coax Sable to eat again. The dog was being stubborn, turning her nose away from the bowl. She does this sometimes, Henry said, frustrated. Gets picky. Jareth examined Sable and felt her nose, still cool and damp, a good sign. She may just not be hungry yet. Try again in an hour. Henry sighed and stood, running a hand through his hair. I need to go check the far pasture, he said. See if any more of the flock wandered back. Will you both be all right here? We will be fine, Jareth assured him. Go, do what you need to do. After he left, Iris helped Jareth lay out the gathered plants to dry on a clean cloth. They worked in companionable silence for a while, then Iris spoke up. He is different with you here, she said quietly. Jareth glanced at her. Different how? Less sad. He talks more. And this morning he smiled at Sable. Iris carefully arranged a bunch of comfrey stems. I have not seen him smile in a long time. Jareth did not know what to say to that. She focused on sorting yarrow leaves, trying to ignore the warmth that bloomed in her chest at the thought of Henry smiling. You think you will stay? Iris asked. After Sable is better. I am a wanderer, Jareth said carefully. I go where I am needed. We need you, Iris said simply. Then, as if embarrassed by her own boldness, she ducked her head and busied herself with the plants. Jareth reached out and gently squeezed the girl's shoulder. Iris looked up, surprised, and Jareth saw tears shimmering in her eyes. I will stay as long as I can, Jareth said. It was the most honest thing she could offer. That afternoon, Jareth taught Iris how to make a healing salve from the plants they had gathered. They worked at the table, crushing herbs with a mortar and pestle, mixing them with rendered fat and beeswax. Iris was meticulous, measuring each ingredient with care. This is the same salve I used on Sable, Jareth explained. It helps wounds heal faster and keeps infection away. Can it work on people too? Iris asked. Yes. Burns, cuts, scrapes, even old scars sometimes if you catch them early enough. Iris touched her arm absently, and Jareth noticed a long, faded scar running from the girl's elbow to her wrist. How did you get that? She asked gently. The day my parents died, Iris said softly. I tried to help my mother and I knocked over a pot of boiling water. It burned me pretty bad. The village healer fixed it, but she said it would scar. Jareth examined the scar more closely. It was old, well healed, but the tissue was still slightly raised and discolored. This salve would not do much for it now, she admitted, but I have something else. An oil made from rosehip and calendula. It might help fade it a little if you use it every day. Would you make it for me? Iris asked. I will, Jareth promised. They were just finishing the salve when Henry returned, looking tired but less grim than when he had left. He was carrying something in his arms, a small bundle of wool. I found 3 more ewes, he said. And this. He held up the bundle, and Jareth saw it was a lamb, barely old enough to be weaned. She was stuck in a ravine, must have been there since the raid. I do not know how she survived this long. Jareth took the lamb and examined her quickly. Dehydrated, malnourished, but alive. She needs milk and warmth. Do you have a bottle? Somewhere, Henry said. He began rummaging through a chest in the corner while Jareth wrapped the lamb in a clean cloth and held her close to the fire. Iris knelt beside her, stroking the lamb's head with gentle fingers. Will she be okay? If we can get food into her, yes, Jareth said. Henry found an old nursing bottle, and Jareth showed him how to mix goat's milk with a little honey for extra nourishment. The lamb drank greedily, her tail starting to wag as strength returned to her small body. "She will need to be fed every few hours for the next day or two," Jareth said. "After that, she should be strong enough to manage on her own." Henry nodded, his expression thoughtful as he watched the lamb drink. "I will take the night feedings," he said. "You have already done so much." "I can help," Iris piped up. "I want to help." Henry looked at his niece, and for the first time since Jareth had arrived, she saw real warmth in his eyes. "All right," he said. "We will do it together." That night, the three of them took turns feeding the lamb and checking on Sable. The dog was improving steadily, able to put a little weight on her injured paw without whimpering. The lamb, whom Iris named Clover, slept in a basket near the hearth, gaining strength with each feeding. Jareth found herself drawn into the rhythm of the household, helping with chores she had no obligation to perform. She milked the cow in the morning, gathered eggs from the henhouse, helped Iris prepare meals. Henry watched her with a kind of quiet wonder, as though he could not quite believe she was real. On the third day, Iris asked Jareth to teach her more about healing. They spent the afternoon making tinctures and poultices, while Henry worked on repairing a section of fence that the raiders had destroyed. When he came in for supper, he found the table covered with jars and bottles, each labeled in Iris's careful handwriting. "We made medicine," Iris announced proudly. "For all kinds of things. Jareth says I am a good student." "You are," Jareth confirmed. "She has a gift for this work." Henry smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and softened his whole face. "Her mother would be proud," he said. Then to Jareth, "Thank you for teaching her." "It is my pleasure," Jareth said, and realized it was true. That night, after Iris had gone to bed, Henry and Jareth sat by the fire listening to the wind outside. Sable was curled up between them, her injured paw nearly healed. Clover dozed in her basket, content and warm. "I have been thinking," Henry said quietly, "about what happens when the week is up." Jareth's heart gave an odd little lurch. "Oh, the flock is still scattered," Henry continued, "and I need to focus on gathering them before winter comes. But I cannot leave Iris alone, and I cannot take her with me into the hills. It is too dangerous." He paused, his eyes meeting hers across the firelight. "Would you consider staying a bit longer, just until I can get the sheep settled? I will pay you whatever you ask." Jareth should have said no. Should have reminded him that she was a wanderer, that she had other places to be. But the truth was, she had nowhere she needed to be. No one waiting for her, no urgent summons to the next village. "I do not need payment," she said slowly, "but I will stay. For Iris's sake and for the animals." The relief on Henry's face was almost painful to see. "Thank you," he said. "I know it is a lot to ask." "It is not," Jareth said softly. "I have grown fond of her and of this place." She did not add "and of you," though the words hung unspoken in the air between them. Henry's eyes held hers for a long moment, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. Something warm and yearning and afraid. Then he looked away, clearing his throat. "I should check on Clover one more time before bed." He stood and busied himself with the lamb, giving them both a chance to step back from whatever had almost happened. Jareth excused herself and went to the shed, her heart beating faster than it should. She was falling, she realized. Falling for this broken little household, for the girl who needed a mother and the man who needed to remember how to live. It was foolish and dangerous, and everything she had sworn to avoid. But as she lay in the straw, listening to the night sounds of the farm, Jareth could not bring herself to regret it. The days began to blur together in a way that was both comforting and unsettling. Jareth fell into the rhythms of the household as though she had always been there. She woke with the sun, helped with morning chores, spent her afternoons teaching Iris or tending to the animals. Sable's paw healed cleanly, and soon the dog was walking with only a slight limp. Clover grew fat and playful, following Iris around like a devoted shadow. Henry spent most of his time in the hills, searching for the scattered flock. He would leave before dawn and return at dusk, often with one or two more ewes, occasionally empty-handed but never giving up. Jareth watched him push himself to exhaustion, watched the lines deepen around his eyes, and wished she could ease his burden. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after she had arrived, Henry came home with a visitor. The man was older, perhaps 60, with silver hair and the weathered look of someone who had spent his life outdoors. He introduced himself as Walter Hayes, a neighbor from the next valley over. "Heard you had some trouble with raiders," Walter said, accepting a cup of cider from Iris. "Wanted to see if you needed help." "I am managing," Henry said, but his voice was tight. Walter's eyes flicked to Jareth, and she saw the moment he registered what she was. His expression did not change, but something cooled in his gaze. "Who is this?" he asked. "Jareth Lowell," Henry said. "She is a healer. She saved Sable and has been helping with the household." "An orc," Walter said flatly. "In your home, with the child." Jareth felt her spine stiffen, but she kept her face neutral. She had dealt with this kind of prejudice before, though it never stopped stinging. "She is a healer," Henry repeated, an edge creeping into his voice. "And a good one. We are lucky to have her." Walter set down his cup with a sharp click. "Henry, I know you have been through a lot, losing Margaret, taking in the girl, the raid. But bringing an orc into your home is not the answer. People will talk." "Let them talk," Henry said. "It is not just talk I am worried about," Walter said. "There are those who would see this as a betrayal. A human and an orc living under the same roof. It is not natural." Iris had gone very still, her eyes wide and frightened. Jareth wanted to leave to remove herself from the situation, but she could not bear the thought of making it worse by running. Henry stood, his jaw set. "Jareth is a guest in my home," he said quietly, "and she will be treated with respect. If you cannot do that, Walter, then I will ask you to leave." Walter stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head. "You are making a mistake, Henry. Mark my words." He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. The cottage fell silent except for the crackle of the fire. Henry sank back into his chair, rubbing his face with both hands. "I am sorry," he said to Jareth. "He had no right to speak to you that way." "He is not wrong about one thing," Jareth said carefully. "People will talk, and there may be consequences for you and Iris." "I do not care about talk," Henry said fiercely. "You saved Sable. You have helped Iris more in 2 weeks than I have in months. You have every right to be here." Iris got up and threw her arms around Jareth's waist, burying her face against her side. "Please do not leave," she whispered. "Please." Jareth held the girl close, her heart aching. "I am not leaving," she said. "Not yet." But the encounter with Walter had shaken her. She knew the kind of trouble an orc's presence could bring to a human household: suspicion, mistrust, sometimes worse. And Henry and Iris had been through enough already. That night, she lay awake in the shed, wrestling with the decision she knew she would have to make. Stay and risk bringing harm to the people she had come to care for, or leave and break the fragile bonds they had formed. The answer should have been simple, but her heart, traitorous thing, refused to cooperate. The next morning, Henry asked Jareth to come with him to check the far pasture. "I could use your eyes," he said. "Some of the ewes I brought back are limping. I want to make sure it is nothing serious." Jareth agreed, and they set out together, leaving Iris with strict instructions to watch Sable and Clover. The walk was long, taking them up into the hills where the grass grew thick and wild. The sheep Henry had gathered were grazing peacefully, and Jareth spent an hour examining each one, checking hooves for stones or injury. "This one has an abscess," she said, pointing to a ewe with a pronounced limp. "It will need to be drained and cleaned." Henry held the ewe steady while Jareth worked, his presence solid and reassuring. When she finished, he released the sheep and turned to her. "I have been wanting to talk to you," he said. "About what Walter said." "You do not need to explain," Jareth said quickly. "Yes, I do." Henry took a breath. "When Margaret died, I thought my life was over. I shut myself off from everything and everyone. When Iris came, I tried to be there for her, but I was so deep in my own grief that I could barely see her. Then the raid happened, and I lost Sable, and I thought I had nothing left to give." He paused, his eyes on the distant horizon. "But then you came, and you gave Sable back to me, and you showed me that I was not as alone as I thought. You have been kinder to Iris than I have been in months. You have brought life back to this place." Jareth's throat was tight. "I only did what anyone would do." "No," Henry said, turning to face her fully. "You did more than that. You saw a hurt animal and you helped, even though you knew I was human. You stayed, even though you had every reason to leave. You have treated us with kindness and patience, and I do not know how to thank you for that." "You do not need to thank me," Jareth said, "but I do." Henry stepped closer, and Jareth could see the emotion in his eyes, raw and unguarded. "Because somewhere along the way you stopped being just a healer who saved my dog. You became someone I care about, someone I do not want to lose." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Jareth felt her heart race, felt the pull of something she had not allowed herself to name. "Henry," she said softly, "this is dangerous for you, for Iris. Walter was right about one thing: people will not accept an orc in your home. They will make life hard for you." "I know," Henry said, "but I would rather face hard times with you than easy times without you." Jareth felt something crack open inside her, all the walls she had built to protect herself crumbling under the weight of his honesty. She wanted to tell him that she felt the same, that she had come to care for him and Iris more than she had thought possible. But the words stuck in her throat, tangled up with fear and doubt. Before she could speak, a shout echoed across the hills. Both of them turned to see a figure running toward them. As it got closer, Jareth recognized Iris, her hair flying behind her, her face pale with fear. "Uncle Henry." She gasped as she reached them. "Men came to the cottage. They said they are from the city. They said they are Mama's cousins and they want to talk to you about me." Henry's face went ashen. "What men? What are their names?" "Garrett and Philip Lambert," Iris said, breathing hard. "They said they are my guardians now. They said I have to go with them." Henry exchanged a look with Jareth, and she saw panic flash in his eyes. "Stay here," he told Iris. Then to Jareth, "Come with me. I may need a witness." They ran back to the cottage, Iris struggling to keep up. When they burst through the door, they found two men standing in the center of the room. Both were well dressed in city clothes, one middle-aged with a neatly trimmed beard, the other younger and sharp-eyed. The older man stepped forward. "You must be Henry Rusher. I am Jareth Lambert. This is my brother Philip. We are here to discuss the matter of our cousin Iris." "Iris is my niece," Henry said tightly. "Her father was my brother. She stays with me." "That is what we need to discuss," Jareth said smoothly. "You see, under the law, blood relatives have the right to claim guardianship of a minor, especially when the current guardian is deemed unfit." "Unfit?" Henry's voice was dangerously quiet. "On what grounds?" Philip spoke up, his tone condescending. "On the grounds that you are a widowed shepherd living alone on the frontier with no means to properly educate or care for a young girl. And now, apparently, you have brought an orc into your home." His eyes flicked to Jareth with undisguised disgust. "That alone is grounds for questioning your judgment." Jareth is a healer, Henry said. She has been helping Iris, teaching her. Teaching her what? Garrett asked. Orc ways, savage customs. Jareth felt rage coil in her gut, but she kept her expression calm. Losing her temper would only make things worse. I have been teaching her herb lore, Jareth said evenly. How to make medicine, how to identify healing plants, skills that could save her life one day. Skills a proper young lady has no need of, Philip said dismissively. Iris is entitled to an inheritance from her parents. A modest sum, but enough to ensure her future if managed correctly. We are prepared to take her into our home in the city, provide her with education, and manage her funds until she comes of age. Manage her funds, Henry repeated slowly. Is that what this is about? Money, Garrett's expression hardened. We are here out of family duty. The fact that there is a small inheritance is merely a detail. I do not want to go with you, Iris said, her voice small but steady. I want to stay with Uncle Henry. You are a child, Philip said. You do not know what is best for you. She knows enough to recognize strangers trying to take her from her home, Henry said. Iris stays with me. I am her legal guardian. For now, Garrett said, but we intend to petition the magistrate. And I doubt any court will look favorably on a man who keeps an orc as a companion. The threat was clear. Jareth felt sick. She had known this could happen, had known her presence would bring trouble, but she had not expected it to come so fast or cut so deep. Get out, Henry said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. Get out of my home. Garrett smiled thinly. We will be back, with the magistrate if necessary. Enjoy your time with the girl while you can. The two men left, and Henry slammed the door behind them so hard the whole cottage shook. He stood there for a moment, breathing hard, then turned to Iris and pulled her into a fierce hug. I will not let them take you, he said. I promise. Iris clung to him, tears streaming down her face. Jareth stood apart, her heart heavy. She knew what she had to do. The only way to protect them was to remove the weapon the Lamberts intended to use against Henry. She had to leave. That night, after Iris had cried herself to sleep and Henry sat staring into the fire with hollow eyes, Jareth began to pack her things. She moved quietly, wrapping her tools and jars in cloth, rolling up her bedding. She would leave at first light before anyone woke. It was better this way. Cleaner. But when she lay down to sleep, she could not. Her mind raced with thoughts of Henry's face when he had said he cared for her, of Iris's small arms around her waist, of the life she had glimpsed here and would now have to walk away from. She was still awake when the shed door creaked open. Henry stood silhouetted against the night sky, his shoulders tense. You are leaving, he said. It was not a question. Jareth sat up. It is the only way to protect you and Iris. As long as I am here, the Lamberts have ammunition against you. So you are just going to run. There was an edge to Henry's voice, something that might have been anger or might have been desperation. After everything, I am not running, Jareth said. I am removing myself from a situation that hurts you. It hurts me more if you leave. Henry stepped into the shed and Jareth could see his face now, etched with pain. Do you not understand that, Henry? She said helplessly. What choice do I have? If I stay, the magistrate will take Iris from you. You will lose her and it will be my fault. Or we fight, Henry said. Together. Fight with what? Jareth demanded. You heard them. They are wealthy city men with the law on their side. I am an orc. My presence in your home is all the evidence they need to prove you are unfit. Then we will prove them wrong, Henry said stubbornly. Iris does not want to go with them. That has to count for something. In a perfect world, maybe, Jareth said, but we do not live in a perfect world. Henry crossed the distance between them and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. I know the world is not perfect. I know people like Walter and the Lamberts exist. But I also know that Iris has smiled more in the past 2 weeks than she has in months. I know that Sable is healed because of you. I know that you have brought something back to this place that I thought was lost forever." His grip tightened. "I know that I am falling in love with you, Jareth Lowell, and I am not ready to let you go." Jareth felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever said those words to her before. No one had ever looked at her the way Henry was looking at her now, as though she were something precious and irreplaceable. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "And that is why I have to leave, to protect you." "No," Henry said fiercely. "You leave because you want to, not because you think it is noble. If you want to go, I will not stop you. But do not leave because you are afraid of what people will say. Do not leave because you think you are not worth fighting for." Jareth closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. Was that what she was doing? Running because she believed deep down that she did not deserve this, that an orc had no right to a human's love, to a place in a family. "I do not know how to fight this," she admitted. "I do not know how to win." "Neither do I," Henry said, "but I know I want to try. Will you try with me?" Jareth opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had opened his home to her, who had defended her against his neighbor, who was offering her his heart despite the cost. "Yes," she said, "I will try." Henry exhaled shakily and pulled her into his arms. Jareth held him tight, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. For the first time since the Lamberts had arrived, she felt a flicker of hope. They would fight. They would find a way. Together. The next morning, Henry sent word to the village magistrate, requesting a formal hearing to settle the matter of Iris's guardianship. The response came back quickly. The hearing would be held in 1 week's time at the village hall. Both parties were required to attend, and witnesses could be called to testify. Henry spent the days leading up to the hearing preparing his case. He gathered records showing his relationship to Iris, his ability to provide for her, letters from his late brother naming him as guardian. Jareth helped where she could, but mostly she focused on keeping Iris calm and distracted. The girl was terrified of being taken away, and it showed in the way she clung to Henry and Jareth, in the nightmares that woke her crying in the middle of the night. Jareth sat with her during those dark hours, telling stories and stroking her hair until she fell back asleep. "What if the magistrate says I have to go?" Iris asked one afternoon as they worked in the garden, pulling up the last of the season's vegetables. "Then we will find another way," Jareth said, "but I do not think it will come to that." "How do you know?" "Because your uncle loves you," Jareth said simply. "And love is stronger than money or laws." Iris looked at her with solemn eyes. "Do you love him, Uncle Henry?" Jareth felt her cheeks warm. "Yes," she said, "I do." "Good," Iris said, "because he loves you too, I can tell." The day of the hearing arrived too quickly. They dressed in their best clothes, such as they were, and made the long walk to the village. The hall was already crowded when they arrived, filled with curious onlookers and whispering neighbors. Jareth felt their eyes on her, felt the weight of their judgment, but she kept her head high. The magistrate was an older woman named Constance Marks, with iron-gray hair and a stern expression. She called the hearing to order and asked the Lamberts to present their case first. Jareth Lambert stood and spoke smoothly about family duty, about Iris's need for education and proper upbringing, about the inheritance that needed to be managed responsibly. He painted a picture of Henry as a grieving, isolated man who had taken in his niece out of obligation, but lacked the resources to truly care for her. "And then there is the matter of the orc," Jareth said, gesturing to Jareth. "A creature living in the home with a vulnerable child. Surely the magistrate can see the danger in that." Jareth bit her tongue, forcing herself to remain calm. Magistrate Marks glanced at her, her expression unreadable. When Garrett finished, it was Henry's turn. He stood, and Jareth could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides. "Iris is my niece," he said. "My brother's daughter. Before he died, he asked me to care for her if anything happened to him and his wife. I gave him my word, and I intend to keep it." He pulled out the letters and documents, passing them to the magistrate. "I may not be wealthy and I may not live in the city, but I can provide for Iris. She has a home, food, safety, and more than that, she has family who loves her." "And the orc?" Magistrate Marks asked. "What is her role in the household?" "Jareth Lowell is a healer," Henry said. "She saved my dog's life and has been teaching Iris valuable skills. She is a friend and a trusted member of the household." "A member of the household," Philip Lambert sneered. "Is that what you call it?" "Everyone knows what happens when humans and orcs live together. It is unnatural." "What is unnatural?" Henry said, his voice rising, "is two men showing up out of nowhere to claim a child they have never met, for the sake of an inheritance they have no right to." The hall erupted in murmurs. Magistrate Marks rapped her gavel sharply. "Order! I will have order." When the room quieted, she looked at Iris. "Child, come forward." Iris stood on shaking legs and walked to the front of the hall. She looked so small, so vulnerable, and Jareth's heart ached for her. "Iris," Magistrate Marks said gently, "do you understand what is happening here?" "Yes, madam," Iris said in a small voice. "They want to take me away from Uncle Henry. And how do you feel about that?" Iris took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was stronger. "I do not want to go. I want to stay with Uncle Henry. He is my family, and Jareth is my family too. She has been kind to me. She teaches me things and tells me stories and makes me feel safe. They both do." "Your cousins say they can give you a better life," Magistrate Marks said. "Education, opportunities." "Do those things not matter to you?" "They matter," Iris said. "But what matters more is being with people who love me, people who want me, not just my inheritance." Jareth Lambert opened his mouth to object, but Magistrate Marks silenced him with a look. "That is all," she said to Iris. "You may sit down." Iris returned to her seat between Henry and Jareth, her face pale but determined. Jareth squeezed her hand. Magistrate Marks reviewed the documents in silence, her brow furrowed. Finally, she looked up. "This is a complicated matter," she said. "On one hand, the Lamberts are blood relatives and have the means to provide for the child. On the other hand, Henry Rusher was named as guardian by the child's father, and the child herself has expressed a clear preference." She paused. "However, the presence of an orc in the household is troubling. Not because I share the prejudices of some in this room, but because it raises questions about the environment in which the child is being raised." Jareth felt her stomach drop. This was it. The magistrate was going to rule against them, but Magistrate Marks was not finished. "I would like to hear from the orc herself. Jareth Lowell, please stand." Jareth stood, her heart pounding. She had not expected to be called upon. "Tell me," Magistrate Marks said. "What is your intention in this household? Why have you stayed?" Jareth chose her words carefully. "I stayed because I was asked to help heal an injured animal. I stayed because I saw a child who needed someone to care for her. I stayed because I found a place where I could be useful, where I was welcomed despite what I am." "And what are your intentions toward the child?" "To teach her, to protect her, to care for her as best I can," Jareth said. "I have no claim on Iris. I know that. But I love her as though she were my own. And toward Henry Rusher," Jareth met Henry's eyes across the room, "I love him too, and I believe he loves me, but I will not let that love be used as a weapon against him. If my presence here costs him his niece, then I will leave." The hall was silent. Magistrate Mark studied Jareth for a long moment, then looked at Henry. "Is this true?" she asked. "Do you love this orc?" Henry stood. "Yes, I do. And if loving someone who has shown me and my niece nothing but kindness is a crime, then I am guilty." Magistrate Mark sighed and sat back in her chair. "Love is not a crime, Mr. Rusher, but it does complicate matters." She looked at the Lamberts. "You claim to want what is best for Iris. But I see no evidence that you have ever had a relationship with her, or that you are motivated by anything other than financial gain. I am inclined to leave guardianship with Henry Rusher." Garrett Lambert surged to his feet. "You cannot be serious." "An orc in the home." "I am well aware of the orc in the home," Magistrate Mark said sharply. "And I am also aware that interspecies relationships, while unusual, are not illegal. If Mr. Rusher chooses to share his home with Jareth Lowell, that is his right. As long as the child is cared for and not in danger, I have no grounds to remove her." She rapped her gavel. "Guardianship remains with Henry Rusher. The inheritance will be held in trust for Iris until she comes of age, managed by an independent trustee. The Lamberts' petition is denied." "This hearing is closed." The hall erupted in noise, some people cheering, others grumbling. Jareth barely heard any of it. All she could see was Iris throwing her arms around Henry's waist, crying with relief. All she could feel was the weight lifting from her chest, the impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, they had won. Henry looked at her over Iris's head, his eyes shining. "We did it," he mouthed. Jareth nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They walked home in a daze, Iris skipping ahead, her earlier fear forgotten. When they reached the cottage, Henry pulled Jareth aside while Iris ran to check on Sable and Clover. "I meant what I said in there," he told her. "I love you, and I do not care who knows it." "I love you too," Jareth said. "But Henry, this is not over. The Lamberts may be gone, but there will be others, people who do not accept us." "Let them come," Henry said. "We will face them together, you, me, and Iris. A family." Jareth felt tears spill over. "A family," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." Henry cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Jareth saw Iris watching from the doorway, grinning. "Does this mean Jareth is staying forever?" the girl asked. Henry looked at Jareth, his eyebrows raised in question. Jareth laughed, the sound bright and free. "Yes," she said. "I am staying forever." Iris cheered and ran to hug them both, and the three of them stood there in the fading light, wrapped in each other's arms. It was not perfect. It would never be easy. But it was theirs, and that was enough. The autumn deepened into winter, and life at the cottage settled into a new rhythm. Jareth became a permanent fixture in the household, no longer a guest but a true member of the family. She and Henry spoke of marriage, but decided to wait until spring, when the lambing season was over and they could have a proper celebration. Iris thrived under Jareth's tutelage, learning herb lore and animal healing with an eagerness that warmed Jareth's heart. The girl had a true gift, a gentleness and intuition that reminded Jareth of her own mother. By midwinter, Iris could make basic salves and tinctures on her own, and she helped Jareth treat the sheep when they fell ill. Henry slowly rebuilt his flock, gathering more of the scattered ewes and even trading for a few new ones. With Sable's help, the work went faster, and by the time the first snow fell, he had nearly 30 sheep, enough to sustain them through the winter and provide wool for trade in the spring. The villagers' reactions to Jareth's presence were mixed. Some, like Walter Hayes, remained cold and disapproving. But others, especially those who had heard Iris speak at the hearing, began to warm to her. When a farmer's prize horse fell ill and the village healer could not help, Jareth was called in. She saved the horse's life, and word spread. Soon, she had more work than she could handle, treating animals from farms all over the valley. Money was no longer a worry. Between Henry's wool and Jareth's healing fees, they had enough to live comfortably, even to save a little for Iris's future. The cottage felt warmer, fuller, alive in a way it had not been in years. One night in the depths of winter, as they sat around the fire, Iris asked Jareth to tell her about orc culture. "I do not know much," Jareth admitted. "I was raised among humans. My mother left her clan when she was young. She said they did not approve of her healing ways, thought it made her soft." "Do you ever wish you could meet them?" Iris asked. "Your clan," Jareth considered. "Sometimes, but I think I have found my clan here, with you and your uncle." Henry reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "You are part of us now," he said, "for as long as you want to be." "Forever," Jareth said. "I want to be part of this family forever." "Then you will be," Henry said simply. That night, after Iris had gone to bed, Henry asked Jareth to marry him properly. He did not have a ring, but he gave her a small carving he had made, a wooden bird with spread wings. "It is supposed to be a dove," he said sheepishly. "I am not much of a carver, but it made me think of you. Free and beautiful and strong." Jareth turned the carving over in her hands, feeling the smooth wood, the careful details. "It is perfect," she said. "And yes, I will marry you." They kissed by the firelight, and Jareth felt a happiness so complete it was almost frightening. She had spent so much of her life wandering, never staying long enough to put down roots. But here, in this small cottage with this man and this child, she had found something she had not known she was searching for. She had found home. Winter gave way to spring, and with it came the lambing season. The cottage was chaos for weeks, with newborn lambs everywhere, bleeding and stumbling on wobbly legs. Jareth and Iris worked alongside Henry, helping with difficult births, caring for orphaned lambs, teaching the new mothers to nurse. It was exhausting work, but also joyful. Iris named each lamb, keeping careful records in a little book Jareth had given her. Sable herded the flock with the ease of long practice, her injured paw completely healed, only a faint scar remaining as evidence of her ordeal. Clover, now nearly full-grown, had become the flock's unofficial leader, guiding the other sheep with a confidence that made Henry laugh. "That lamb has more sense than half my ewes," he said. On a warm day in early spring, they held the wedding. It was a small affair, just a few neighbors and the village priest who had agreed to perform the ceremony despite some raised eyebrows. Jareth wore a simple dress that Iris had helped her sew, dyed green to match her skin. Henry wore his best shirt, mended and pressed. Iris stood between them, holding a bouquet of wildflowers, beaming with pride. When the priest asked if there were any objections, the small gathering remained silent, and Jareth felt a surge of gratitude for these people who had chosen to accept her. She and Henry exchanged vows under the open sky, promising to love and support each other through whatever came. When they kissed, Iris cheered, and even Sable barked her approval. The celebration afterward was modest but warm. Neighbors brought food and drink, and someone played a fiddle while children danced in the grass. Walter Hayes was not there, but a few of his sons were, and they shook Henry's hand and nodded respectfully to Jareth. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Jareth stood with Henry and Iris, watching the last of the light fade from the sky. The cottage behind them glowed with firelight, smoke rising from the chimney. The flock grazed peacefully in the near pasture, Sable keeping watch. Everything was quiet and perfect. "Are you happy?" Henry asked, his arm around Jareth's shoulders. "Yes," Jareth said. "I am." "Good," Iris said, squeezing Jareth's hand, "because we are happy too." They went inside together, closing the door on the night. The fire was warm, the food plentiful, the laughter easy. Jareth sat at the table watching Henry stoke the fire and Iris set out bread and cheese and felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. This was her family, her home, her future, and it was more than she had ever dared to dream. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, illnesses and injuries, neighbors who never quite accepted an orc in their midst. But through it all, the family at the cottage endured. Iris grew into a skilled healer in her own right, her reputation spreading throughout the valley. By the time she was 16, she was treating both animals and people, her gentle manner and sharp mind earning her respect even from those who had once looked down on her for living with an orc. Henry's flock prospered, growing to over 100 sheep. He became known for the quality of his wool, and traders came from distant towns to buy it. The cottage was expanded, a new room added for Iris as she grew older, a proper workroom built for Jareth's healing supplies. Sable lived to a ripe old age, eventually passing peacefully in her sleep by the hearth. They buried her on the hill, overlooking the pastures she had loved, and Iris carved a marker from stone. The loss was hard, but by then they had a new dog, a young border collie named Swift that Iris had trained from a puppy. Clover became the matriarch of the flock, producing strong lambs year after year. She still followed Iris around whenever the girl was in the pastures, and Jareth often smiled at the sight of them together, the lamb she had helped save and the child she had helped heal. One spring, when Iris was 18 and on the cusp of womanhood, a young man from the village began courting her. His name was Thomas, and he was the son of a blacksmith with kind eyes and a steady temperament. Henry was wary at first, protective of his niece, but Jareth reminded him that Iris was old enough to make her own choices. "She is so young," Henry said, watching Iris and Thomas walk together through the garden. "She is the age I was when I left home," Jareth replied. "And she is wiser than I was at 18. You have raised her well." "We have raised her well," Henry corrected, pulling Jareth close. "This was not just me." Jareth leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. They were older now, both of them marked by the passage of time. Henry's hair was fully gray, and Jareth had earned a few scars from difficult animal births and temperamental livestock. But the love between them had only deepened, weathering every storm. Thomas proved to be a good young man, patient and respectful. He did not care that Iris had been raised partly by an orc. In fact, he seemed to admire Jareth, often asking her advice about animals and listening carefully to her answers. When he asked Henry for permission to marry Iris, Henry gave it with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "She will always be my little girl," he said gruffly, "but I know you will care for her." "I will," Thomas promised, "with my whole heart." The wedding was held at the cottage, a much larger affair than Henry and Jareth's had been. The whole village turned out, and even Walter Hayes attended, though he still gave Jareth a wide berth. Iris was radiant in a dress of cream and blue, and Thomas could not take his eyes off her. When the ceremony was over and the dancing began, Jareth found herself standing at the edge of the celebration, watching the people she had come to know over the years. Some of them had accepted her, some had tolerated her, and a few still looked at her with suspicion. But she was no longer the outsider she had been that first day in the creek. She was Jareth Rusher now, healer and wife and mother in all but blood. She had a place here. She belonged. Henry found her and pulled her into the dance, his movements clumsy but enthusiastic. Jareth laughed and let him spin her, feeling light and free. Iris caught her eye from across the crowd and waved, her face glowing with happiness. "Thank you," Iris mouthed, Jareth nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Thank you too, she thought, for letting me be part of this. For giving me a family when I thought I would always be alone. As the night wore on and the stars came out, Jareth and Henry slipped away from the celebration to walk in the quiet pastures. The sheep were settled for the night, the lambs sleeping beside their mothers. The cottage behind them was full of light and laughter. We did well, Henry said quietly. With Iris, she is going to be happy. She is, Jareth agreed, and she will always have us if she needs us. Henry stopped walking and turned to face her. Do you ever regret it, staying here? Giving up your wandering life? Jareth smiled and reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the familiar lines. Not for a single moment. This life, this family, it is everything I never knew I wanted. I love you, Henry said. I have loved you since the day I saw you in that creek, healing my dog with such gentleness, and I will love you until my last breath. And I love you, Jareth replied. You and Iris. You are my heart, my home. They stood together in the starlight, two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life together despite the world's objections. Behind them, the cottage glowed warm and welcoming. Before them, the future stretched out, uncertain but full of promise. Jareth thought of the girl she had been, the wandering healer with no ties and no family. That girl seemed like a stranger now, a shadow of someone she had left behind. She was Jareth Rusher now, and she had everything that mattered: a home, a family, a love that would last forever. And as Henry took her hand and led her back to the celebration, Jareth knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and sorrows. Iris and Thomas had children, first a boy they named Samuel, then twin girls they called Rose and Lily. Jareth became a grandmother in all but name, teaching the children the same herb lore she had taught their mother, telling them stories by the fire on cold winter nights. Samuel was quiet and thoughtful, with a gift for working with animals that rivaled Jareth's own. The twins were wild and adventurous, always getting into mischief, but with hearts as kind as their mothers. All three children grew up knowing Jareth as grandmother, never questioning her green skin or her tusks. To them, she was simply the wise, gentle woman who always had a story and a remedy for whatever ailed them. Henry eventually handed over most of the flock management to a young shepherd he had hired, content to spend his days helping Jareth in the workroom or playing with his grandchildren. His body had slowed with age, his hands becoming stiff and his back aching on cold mornings, but his spirit remained strong. On a soft summer evening, when the grandchildren had been put to bed and Iris and Thomas had returned to their own home in the village, Henry and Jareth sat on the bench outside the cottage, watching the sun set over the hills they had walked together for so many years. "Do you remember the day we met?" Henry asked. "When you were kneeling in that creek saving Sable?" "I remember," Jareth said. "I thought you were going to chase me off. Most humans would have." "I knew the moment I saw you that you were special," Henry said. "The way you touched Sable, so careful and kind. I had never seen anyone, human or orc, treat an animal with such tenderness." "And I knew the moment I saw how you looked at her that you were a good man," Jareth replied. "A man who could love deeply, even if he had forgotten how." Henry took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that plagued his joints. "You taught me to love again, you and Iris. You saved more than just my dog that day. You saved me." "We saved each other," Jareth said softly. "I was so lonely before I found you. I thought that was just my fate, to wander alone until I died. But you gave me a reason to stay. You gave me a home." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. The sheep in the near pasture were settling down for the night, their gentle bleating a familiar lullaby. Inside the cottage, Swift was curled up by the hearth, dreaming whatever dogs dream. "I am getting old," Henry said after a while. "My body is wearing out." "We are both getting old," Jareth said, "but we are together. That is what matters." "Promise me something," Henry said, turning to look at her. "When I am gone, do not go back to wandering. Stay here. Stay with Iris and the grandchildren. They need you." "I will stay," Jareth promised. "This is my home now. I would not leave it for anything." Henry relaxed, satisfied. "Good. That is good." They sat together until the last light faded from the sky, then went inside to the warmth and comfort of the cottage that had sheltered their love for so many years. That night, they lay in bed with Henry's arms around Jareth, listening to the night sounds through the open window. "I have been so blessed," Henry murmured, already half asleep, "to have found you, to have had this life." "As have I," Jareth whispered. She pressed a kiss to his shoulder and closed her eyes, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing, the warmth of his body against hers. She had been blessed indeed. Blessed with a family, with love, with a place to belong. All because she had stopped one day to help an injured dog and met a man who saw past her green skin to the person beneath. The orc woman who had rescued his injured dog had found the family she never expected. And in doing so, she had found herself. Henry passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, on a quiet autumn morning much like the one when Jareth had first arrived. She woke to find him still beside her, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. The grief was immense, a physical weight that pressed down on her chest and made it hard to breathe. But she did not break. She had Iris and the grandchildren and the life they had built together. They buried Henry on the hill next to Sable, with a marker carved by Samuel, who had inherited his great-uncle's love of working with his hands. The whole village came to pay their respects, even Walter Hayes, who approached Jareth with awkward condolences. "He was a good man," Walter said gruffly. "And you made him happy. I was wrong about you. I am sorry it took me so long to see it." "Thank you," Jareth said, touched by the admission. "That means more than you know." After the funeral, Jareth moved into the expanded cottage permanently, giving Iris and Thomas their space, but always available when needed. She continued her healing work, training Samuel in the art when he showed interest. The twins, now young women, often brought their friends to meet their grandmother, proudly introducing Jareth to a new generation that seemed less concerned with the color of her skin than with the wisdom she could share. One spring morning, as Jareth walked through the pastures checking on the newborn lambs, she paused at the hill where Henry and Sable were buried. The grass was green and lush, dotted with wildflowers. She could see the cottage in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney where Iris was making breakfast for the family. "We did well, my love," Jareth said quietly to the marker. "Iris is happy. The grandchildren are thriving. The flock is healthy. Everything we built together is still here, still strong." She felt a peace settle over her, warm and comforting. Henry was gone, but his love remained, woven into every part of this place, this family, this life. And Jareth would carry that love forward for however many years she had left. She was not the wandering healer anymore, the outsider looking in. She was Jareth Rusher, grandmother and elder, healer and teacher. She was part of something larger than herself, part of a story that had begun with an injured dog and a chance meeting in a creek, but had grown into something beautiful and enduring. She had found her family. She had found her home. And she would spend the rest of her days honoring the gift that Henry and Iris had given her, the gift of belonging. Samuel eventually took over the flock entirely, proving himself to be as skilled a shepherd as his great-uncle had been. He married a girl from the next valley, and they built a small house on the property, close enough to help with the animals but far enough to have their own space. They gave Jareth more great-grandchildren, a boy and 2 girls who were equally fascinated by her stories and her healing skills. Rose and Lily both became healers in their own right, though Rose focused on people while Lily followed Jareth's path with animals. Together, they expanded the family's reputation throughout the region, and people came from miles away to seek their help. Jareth spent her final years surrounded by the family she had gained, teaching the youngest generation, helping where she could, and watching with pride as the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren flourished. She was old now, her green skin lined with wrinkles, her movements slow and careful. But her mind was sharp, and her heart was full. On a warm summer evening, as she sat in the garden with the great-grandchildren playing at her feet, Iris came to sit beside her. "You look content," Iris said, now a grandmother herself, her hair streaked with silver. "I am," Jareth said. "I have everything I could ever want." "You gave us so much," Iris said softly. "You taught me to heal, to love, to see past what people say and look at who they really are. You saved this family." "We saved each other," Jareth said, echoing the words she had once said to Henry. "You and your uncle gave me a home when I had none. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. That is the greatest gift I have ever received." Iris leaned her head on Jareth's shoulder and they sat together, watching the sun set over the hills. The cottage behind them was full of life, multiple generations gathered for supper. The pastures were dotted with sheep, healthy and content. Everything was exactly as it should be. "Thank you," Iris whispered, "for staying, for becoming my mother when I needed one, for loving us." "Thank you," Jareth replied, her voice thick with emotion, "for letting me." They sat together until the stars came out, surrounded by family, wrapped in love. And Jareth knew, with absolute certainty, that this was the life she had been meant to live. The orc woman who had rescued an injured dog had found the family she never expected. And in the end, that family had rescued her right back, giving her a home, a purpose, and a love that would echo through generations. She had wandered for so long, searching without knowing what she sought. But here, in this small cottage on the frontier, surrounded by the descendants of a man who had looked past her green skin to see her heart, she had found everything. She had found her place in the world, and it was perfect.